Hey guys, and welcome back. Today is June 10th, 2019. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the story we got today about an event that occurred yesterday in the Dominican Republic. Boston Red Sox legend David Ortiz, who led the team to 3 different World Series championships between 2004 and 2013, was shot in the back while sitting outside of a bar and lounge with a friend of his. And apparently the gunman was chased down and beaten up by the public. There's some video of this encounter. You can actually see Ortiz get shot, or at least a man walk up to him with a gun and fire it. And then there's also some video out there of what is apparently the gunman who was tackled and beaten up by a crowd of people. Now, whether or not the event was real and actually occurred like it was reported is not really going to be a topic of this video. That's for each person to question on their own. But what I will show you is that these events that happen in the mainstream media, as I expose on a near daily basis on my channel, are all happening by a code of letters and numbers. A code called Gematria, the ancient practice of coding numbers into words. This practice, which originated in Greek and Hebrew, appears to be well and alive in today's English alphabet. We start with ordinal, which numbers the alphabet 1 through 26, each letter getting a number relative to its position in the alphabet. The reduction methods use the rules of numerology to reduce each double-digit number to a single digit. And when you compare this language with dates on the calendar and date durations, you find that something very, very strange is going on. And a lot of us call a lot of these news stories fake. It's definitely a mix of both. Mainstream media hoaxes, real-life events happening with organic numerology. But either way, we're going to talk about how this story, once again, has to do with the Eclipse Crucifixion Code. This based in the most famous story of the New Testament, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. An event which, according to 3 of the 4 Gospels, occurred while the sky fell dark, an event that many people believe was a total solar eclipse, and it certainly seems like the numerical hints are there. And we'll talk about that as the video goes on. So first, as we usually do, we start with the date numerology of this incident. June 9th, 2019 had what we call full numerology of 54, 6 plus 9 plus 20 plus 19. You'll also see some other calculation methods on here, this one called the life lesson number or reduced numerology. Either one gives us the number 27. And this stands out for a couple interesting reasons. The word baseball in the alphabetic order sums to 54. Also, in the reverse reduction method, this reverse method is where Z sums to 1, Y is assigned to 2, and A gets the value of 26. So baseball sums to 54 in 2 of these different ciphers, and this story about a baseball star occurring on a date with 54 numerology. In single reduction, with the S exception, baseball sums to 27, and think, of course, about how each team gets 27 outs per game. In the reverse alphabetic order, baseball sums to 162, and this is a very interesting number. As baseball fans will understand, teams play 162 games each major league season. In fact, if you use prime numbers, baseball sums to 162 there as well. And it just so happens that this shooting, which occurred on June 9th, fell exactly 162 days before the November 18th birthday of David Ortiz. As you see on Wikipedia, he was born on November 18th, a very interesting date that we will also be talking about as we go on. And in 162 days, he'll be turning 44 years old. And in full reduction, the standard reduction method, the word shooting equals 44. But now we're going to get into the part of the video where I'm very consistent from video to video. We're talking about essentially a chunk of the same numbers in all of these different rituals. Now, Ortiz was 162 days before his birthday, but if you instead measure to his most recent birthday, you find it was exactly 29 weeks. Now, in Jewish Gematria, also called Latin, as it is based on the original Latin alphabetic order, with more modern English characters placed at the end, the word Christ in this method sums to 290, and this is a very significant number. We'll talk about the number 1331. 1331 eclipse sums to 1331. The only total eclipse that year was on the date November 30th, which sums to 1331. And this appears to be central to the Eclipse crucifixion code. In fact, 133 and 331 both sum to 1331. So in this method, Christ equals 290. David Ortiz, 29 weeks, 0 days after his birthday. The name of the shooter, with foreign characters removed, had the 209 gematria. But what's more interesting is that the word Christ, which has this 290 value, also sums to 77 and 85. And this stands out because both Boston and Red Sox also have the values of 77 and 85. You might also notice that all three of these, Christ, Boston, and Red Sox, also sum to 32. And this is where things get interesting. If you measure to this year's total solar eclipse, which will be the first total eclipse since the Great American Eclipse nearly 2 years ago in 2017, notice how this incident occurred 3 weeks and 2 days before that eclipse. David Ortiz played his last Major League Baseball game on the date October 10th in 2016. Now here it says October 2nd. This was his last regular season appearance. You'll see here, if you read further, that his last game was on October 10th. Well, if you measure from his last game ever in the major leagues to the date that he was shot, it was exactly 32 months. Also, if you measure from the date the Red Sox won the World Series, you'll find it was exactly 32 weeks. Remember, the Red Sox just won this past year's 2018 World Series. As far as the connection to the eclipse goes, eclipse sacrifice has this value of 142. Also 290. We talked about this number with Christ, which I neglected to mention earlier. The date June 9th gives us 1042. Also 128, just like the name David Ortiz. David Ortiz, both 142 and 128. Now, David Ortiz, because he was born in the year 75, hasn't had his birthday yet this year. He's 43 years old. In reduction, Jesus Christ sums to 43. So does the date June 9th, the date that he was shot, which also has overlap with David Ortiz. But check this out. With the K exception, more specifically the V exception, the letter V in this method not reduced because it's a master number, David Ortiz sums to 74 and 61 reverse. The name Jesus equals 74 and 61 in reverse using the standard ordinal methods. There's a couple interesting things about this shooter's name. We talked about the 209 in ordinal, but what I want to focus on is the motorcycle that they told us he was riding. the Bajaj Platina motorcycle. And the reason he was on this type of motorcycle, I believe, has to do with this number in the reverse alphabetic order, 227. In Hebrew, 227, as well as 83, the reduction value of Bajaj Platina, in Hebrew, that's the value of total eclipse, 83 and 227. I talk about this being called the Eclipse Crucifixion Code, which also sums to 227. In fact, in the reverse order, Jesus' crucifixion, 227. And of course, this number is connected to pi, 227. And you might be thinking how that's possible, and I'll explain why. Well, there's this movie, The Life of Pi, based on the book, and in this story, a kid survives 227 days after a shipwreck in a movie called Life of Pi. Well, on a Windows keyboard, hit Alt 227 once, and notice you'll get the pi symbol, and there's a very good reason for this. On a calculator, if you take 22 and divide it by 7, you get the first three digits of pi, 3.14. And if you use the standard alphabetic order, where A equals 1, B equals 2, through Z is 26, 22 divided by 7 equals 314. This number obviously integral to the entire code, pi 314. This event occurred in the city of Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. And in the alphabetic order, this sums to 314. How interesting. The word pi equals 69 in Jewish gematria, and of course think about the date that this shooting occurred. 6/9. Like June 9th, like the gematria of pi. The word circles gives us this value of 69 also. Just another thought before I move on to the next section. I actually checked the gematria of Crucifixion Darkness, which is the name of this Wikipedia page. And I found it pretty interesting that we get the numbers 222 and 120 because the word eclipse sums to 120 and 222. This English cipher, same as the Latin cipher, but it instead uses the current 26-letter English alphabet. Furthermore, Crucifixion Darkness sums to 96. This shooting was on the 9th of June. But how about the 291? If you reverse these numbers, you get 192. That's the Jewish value of eclipse. So there's many alignments between Crucifixion Darkness and the word eclipse. And it just makes you wonder if this is confirmation, so to speak, that an eclipse really is what caused the Crucifixion Darkness. And of course, we have the story about Christ on the cross, painted in 1870. Well, the phrase total eclipse sums to 187. 187, known to many as the homicide code. All right, now we're going to talk about another number that's been of peak interest in the community recently, and that's the number 811. And a lot of people, myself included, believe that something's going to happen on August 11th. Not necessarily a terror attack or a disaster, but there's something planned, and it has to do with the Jewish holiday Tisha B'Av. It has something to do with the eventual rebuilding of the Third Temple, and maybe even the rebirth of the Jewish Messiah. Of course, that is all a matter of speculation, but the numbers speak for themselves, and let's explain how this applies here. Now, David Ortiz might be what we call these Manchurian athletes, someone born and bred for the role. And check out how his full name, David Americo Ortiz Arias sums to 1811 in Jewish Gematria. This is pretty interesting because his birthday is the 18th of November, the date that can be written 18/11. There you see, November 18th. So you have the 811 sequence twice right there. Well, this man was shot in the Dominican Republic. And if you're familiar with my work, you know that I always look at the dates that local politicians took office, as well as their birthdays, when we're looking at news stories originating from international locations. So here, notice how this man was born on November 10th, 1951. Well, if you measure from the date that he was born to the date of this shooting, he was exactly a span of 811 months old. How wild is that? Now, August 11th, the date written 811, on the Gregorian calendar, this is the 223rd day of the year. This man's name, Danilo Medina, sums to 223 in the reverse alphabetic order. Also, his name summing to 56, the same as David Ortiz. Perhaps no coincidence. But speaking about the 811, using the S exception, David Ortiz's full name, with those foreign characters removed, as I often urge us to keep doing, his name sums to 118, again with that S exception. Francis Bacon Gematria, if I can remember how to unlock this here. His nickname is Big Poppy, which also gives us the 118. And this is just another simple cipher that uses capital letters as well. Something that's observed, I don't talk about it very often, but definitely relevant to this part of the riddle. So we're talking about the president, the Dominican Republic, Mr. Medina. Now, if you measure from the date of the shooting to August 11th this year, you'll find it's 2 months and 2 days. And 22, that's the total solar eclipse number, 202. But this is also exactly 22 weeks before Mr. Medina's birthday. And this stands out because Boston equals 22. And, of course, Boston, Massachusetts, summing to 253, which is the 22nd triangular number. So this is a number that's special to Boston, one I posted about in my initial decode talking about the World Series last year. Also, think about the Dominican Republic. The initials DR also has that 22 in ordinal. Talking about David Ortiz and his 1811 Gematria. Also worth pointing out, 1811 is a prime number. See here, it's the 280th prime number. And 280 is the Hebrew value of the phrase total solar eclipse. November 18th, also, by the way, the 322nd day of the year. We all know this number is significant. And when we're talking about eclipses, it's all about the number 1331, which I briefly discussed earlier, the number that represents a total solar eclipse. And my post about the number 1331 is linked below. Very, very important information. Jesus the Messiah sums to 1331. Well, check out English Extended. Boston Red Sox also has this value of 1331. Pretty wild, hey? Oops. So the Toronto Raptors, who will look to close out the NBA Finals tonight, isn't it interesting that they're in the NBA Finals for the first time ever? Toronto Raptors equals 1331 as well. Also, Toronto Raptors equals 224. And it's been exactly 224 days since the Red Sox won the World Series. So it makes you wonder if the Raptors are actually going to close things out tonight. I don't know. Either way, This event perfectly aligned with the Eclipse crucifixion code, and that's why personally I don't believe it's real without really good evidence. That being said, I'm just a guy in his house in Milwaukee, way far away from the incident, so I'm only speculating, but I'm showing you that something very clearly is going on with the numbers behind the scenes here. And whatever reality script, so to speak, is being played out is definitely adhering to the same rules I talk about in all my videos. These alignments they simply can't occur randomly. I mean, everywhere you look, no matter how you type the name, the date, the numerology of the date, what you measure to, it all stands out perfectly. I don't spend hours making these posts, looking for things to line up. It's just the very logical things. The dates local politicians took office. I mean, the date he retired was or his last game, I should say, was the first thing that popped in my head, as well as the date the Red Sox won the World Series. And, of course, it aligns perfectly with the gematria of Boston and Red Sox. So this stuff, it basically writes itself. Once you know the code, it's easy to pick apart and see what's probably a real news story and what we're just being fed by the mainstream media. A couple more random thoughts, I suppose. If we, again, measure to Ortiz's last game to the date he was shot, it was 139 weeks. Toronto Raptors equals the reverse of 139, 931. That's interesting, considering they also have matching gematria with Boston Red Sox in extended. Is it Freemasonry giving us our news? I believe it is. Freemasonry sums to 139. And if you join me in my next video, which I will go live with maybe about 5 to 10 minutes after this video wraps up, we'll talk about how the numbers of Freemasonry were littered all over today's story about a helicopter crashing into a building in New York City. Another story that exhibited the pi numerology, this time through the headline. So stick around on my channel. I'll do a real short video on that coming up shortly. All right, guys, thanks for popping in. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And again, check the links in the description if you're still new to this and want to find more information out on the language of Gematria. All right, everyone, we'll talk to you soon. Peace, love, and God bless. See ya!